The Lunaverse by Rainbow Double Dash, Episode 17, Through the Fire and Flames by Daka Yamar. Chapter 3, Meetings and Partings. Ditzy ran her hoof along the brim of Trixie's hat slowly, but otherwise hid her nervousness behind great determination. "What do you mean you're not going after them?" Doublecross glared back at her, but quickly discovered why trying to stare down Ditzy Do was harder than most. He coughed nervously into his hoof and turned away first. "Those things were able to handle all the soldiers in this building with ease. I have no intention of meeting them again without overwhelming odds in my favor." "But they're getting away!" Ditzy yelled, causing the guard to step back a pace in surprise. "And it will only get harder to track them down the longer you wait," Cheerily pressed, standing her ground on the unicorn's other side. If Dapple was unnerved by the two mares flanking him, he managed to hide it well. "And how do you propose I'm supposed to do that, huh? Dig through the dirt like your friend over there?" A loud crack split the air as if to punctuate his words, as another stone broke under Raindrop's hooves. Grunting softly to herself, she levered the two halves out of the impression she managed to carve out of the rubble. The impression was barely deep enough to reach her wings, and there was no sign of the end yet. Doublecross winced at the noise and turned angrily to the Jasmine Pegasus. "And will you stop that? There's no way you can dig through all that debris!" The only reply Raindrops gave was another grunt before turning back to her work. "At least he's trying," Ditzy said heatedly. "Why aren't you helping her with your magic?" "None of us can use our magic right now." A gray-coated unicorn with a brown mane tied up in a bun walked to the group. She adjusted her glasses before continuing. "Whatever that creature with the four arms did to us was familiar to forcing us to overchannel." She stumbled slightly, but caught herself before she hit the ground. "Ugh, I'm all right. The captain here is putting on a brave show, but I doubt he could use magic any more than the rest of us right now." Doublecross grimaced and stood up straighter. "I thought I told all of you civilians to get out of here. Is no one going to pay attention to what I'm saying? Those creatures might come back here!" Why? They got us at what they were after." The gray unicorn eyed Ditzy and Cheerily coolly. "You all are the bearers of the elements, aren't you?" Cheerily glanced curiously at Ditzy before answering. "That's right. How did you know that?" "My name's Moneypenny," the unicorn answered with a brief nod, "and I'm a secretary at the royal castle. I've heard all about you. Was that Trixie Littlemoon or Lyra Heartstreet who was taken?" "It doesn't matter who she was, because I told you all to leave this building!" Dapple growled, staring at each of them in turn, before turning to stare out the door. "Where's Flash First? He couldn't possibly be taking this long to get to the nearest patrol house!" "Trixie," Cheerily said, completely ignoring the captain. Doublecross ground his teeth and stared bloody daggers at the doorway. Moneypenny nodded to herself. "So to guess, you'll need an expert, but in the absence of one wrinkled tome, is that you over there?" Doublecross's efforts to clear out the building hadn't even succeeded in removing his fellow victims. Several of them were attempting to clean up the worst of the ruin of the library, though they were all a bit out of practice working without their telekinesis. One of them worked apart from the others, searching through the papers scattered all over the floor and occasionally stuffing one into his saddlebag. He looked up sharply when his name was called, and hunched defensively over his bags. Yes? I was just about to leave as soon as I found the last of my research. I'm still allowed to visit the libraries, after all. Although after this, I'm not sure if it's worth the effort anymore." "You wrote in your last appeal that there were caves beneath the castle you wished to investigate," Moneypenny stated, calmly cutting him off before he could launch into a full tirade. "Do you know how to get them?" A sparkle of hope flashed before his eyes, before he tempered it down with caution. I know of a couple of entrances, but the princess has denied all my requests so far. What do you—" "You could get us under the castle!" Raindrop said, climbing out of her hole and walking over to the unicorn. Her tone made it clear she hadn't asked a question. "Now, wait just 1 minute!" Ringletone cried, backing away from the advancing Pegasus. "I have no desire to get anywhere near those creatures ever again! Why should I do anything other than leave right now?" Because I can make sure that the princess will at least consider your appeal if you help, Moneypenny said, leading the others over to the unicorn. Regal looked around the slowly closing circle of mares around him, but before he could respond, 3 ponies burst into the room at a gallop. What happened? We heard Trixie was in danger! Lyra shouted, Carrot Top and Bonbon right behind her. The 3 of them met the rest of the group in the middle of the room and cast worried looks about the destruction. I found them in the gardens coming to find us, Carrot Top explained. You! Bonbon and Regal Tone shouted at the same time, and then looked surprised they had copied each other. Bonbon recovered first and growled at the surrounded stallion. What are you doing here? Charlie cut him off before he could defend himself. He knows how to get to some of the caves beneath the castle. From there, we might be able to track the creatures that took Trixie. Now stop this right this minute! Dapplecross barked, stopping his host hard on the stone floor, and looming over them with all the height at his disposal. This foolishness has gone long enough! I don't care how worried you are about your friend. This is an attack, and will be treated as such! I demand that all you civilians clear out! Huffing slightly from the outburst, he glared around the room, daring any pony to challenge him again. Several of the scholars in the back dropped what they were cleaning, and made out the door without a backward glance. Regal Tone looked like he wanted to join them, but he was trapped in a circle of suddenly angry mares. The others all bristled, Lyra even withdrawing herself dangerously. But before any of them could respond, Moneypenny stalked forward and planted herself right in front of the soldier. How quickly you forget that if it weren't for these civilians, all of us would be down in those tunnels instead of their friend, or worse. Her eyes flicked momentarily to the petrified soldier in the center of the room, but flashed quickly back to Dapple's own. They've already proven themselves better than you against those creatures, so I don't see you have any call to demand them of anything. The way I see it, we all owe them our lives, and I, for one, intend to repay that debt. Besides, she turned and calmly surveyed the group one at a time as she continued. They've already faced down the tyrant's son before. I hardly think that any pony in the castle is better equipped to handle the crisis, but if you still intend to try and stop them, may I remind you that there's only one unicorn in this room that can use her magic right now, and she's firmly for the rescue mission. Dapplecross ground his teeth hard enough to crack a tooth, but he could clearly see when he was beat. Stepping back, he glared down at the secretary. The princess will hear of this. I'll make sure of it, Moneypenny responded, turning her back on him. You are just a secretary? Charlie asked, arching an eyebrow. Well, perhaps not just, Moneypenny smiled. Now that's all settled, you should get going. Dapple held out a hoof to stop the group, pointing to the statue. What about that? You'll end up just like that if you go down there. Or do you have some kind of protection we didn't? The elements, Carrot said. They protected us against Corona's magic, so they should be able to stop the spell easily. The elements are kept in a vault up in the castle. I know where it is. Moneypenny started for the door, but her legs gave again and almost fell. Surprisingly, Dapple caught her before she hit the floor, and held her up until her legs steadied again. We don't have much time, Dizzy said worriedly. They've already got a huge lead. Then you go ahead, Bonbon said with a determined expression. I'll get the elements from the vault and bring them to you. This way, you won't lose any time. She walked over to Lyra and touched their foreheads together. You'll be careful until I get there, won't you? Lyra smiled and gave her a quick kiss. Of course. She turned back, practically bouncing on her hose in anticipation. Well, we've got a plan. Let's go. Regal Tone snubbed out a thoughtful silence to clear his throat. What? Well, let's see. The closest way into the cavern is on the other side of the gardens. Stumbling only occasionally, he had led them out to the building and into the night air. The first thing Trixie was aware of was a dull pounding in her head. After that, a number of sores and aches assaulted her senses, as if they'd been waiting for a perfect chance to strike. Her bed, though warm and a bit lumpy, felt like it was swaying back and forth. Groaning, Trixie shifted to a less painful position, and discovered that her legs wouldn't respond like she wanted to. I don't know what I drank last night, she mumbled, but whatever it was, there had better be more of it left. Her bed jostled her, and she lapsed into silence. Quiet was better for her aching head anyway. There was a bad itch along the back of her neck, but she couldn't get a roof to scratch it. It was as if her hooves were tied. In her flash of the few last hours, her memories returned, and Trixie opened her eyes. She immediately closed them again, trying to block out the light from her sensitive eyes. Then she opened her eyes, realizing that the light wasn't as painful as she expected it to be. Cautiously, she took in her surroundings. She was underground, in some kind of large tunnel. Enormous purple crystals lined every wall she could see, and she should see, and that was because the snake things were glowing. Trixie blinked several times at that, but the soft yellow glow emanating from their scales didn't suddenly come from a reasonable source. There were about 8 or so of the creatures in a clump around the one holding her. Trixie tried to look at the one without moving her head too much, just in case she didn't know she was awake yet. She was trussed up and thrown over the shoulder like a sack of grain. It looked a bit taller and more heavily muscled than the others, but that might have just been because of how close she was to it. Its arm felt warm to the touch. Dimly, Trixie thought that snakes shouldn't feel warm, but the crack of something getting slapped hard interrupted her train of thought. In front of the group, the snake thing with 4 arms was looming over another snake thing, which was rubbing the side of its face. "Why would you take it back to the lava flows?" the 4-armed creature hissed in anger. "Did you think we could return the same way we arrived? Did you think we could protect the artifact like we protect gold? Are you really so stupid you couldn't remember the single part of the plan you were a part of?" One of the creature's hands dipped menacingly into the swath of jewelry around her neck. The creature on the ground hissed fearfully and prostrated itself in panic. "Please, no! Priestess Marith! I beg you! Mercy! Not the stone!" "Hi, priestess," another snake interrupted, slithering out an opening behind the wall. "I've stopped the workers from taking it any farther. It will be back with us shortly." Trixie shook her head, which was still feeling a little thick. "Thank you for asking." "You're welcome." It's tried to get her thoughts back on track. She shouldn't be gaping like a filly, seeing Canterlot for the first time. She needed to work out some way to escape. She looked to the side and stared into the eyes of the snake thing holding her. It smiled wickedly, revealing rows of very pointed teeth. "Okay, no need to panic. Just act now normal." "Hi!" The snake thing grinned wider. "Hi!" It won't go down in history among the great sages, but first contact had been achieved. Now keep it talking, perhaps get it to lower its guard. "Could you loosen these ropes for a second? There's an itch on my neck that's just—" The snake thing ignored her and turned back to the front. "The pony is awake!" "Mud!" Marlith jerked her attention away from her cowering minion, dropped her arm from her necklaces. Much to the relief of said minion, she slithered slowly over to them, the rest of the snake things making a path. "This one recovered faster than the others," she hissed, tilting Trixie's chin up to stare in her eyes. "She either has more magic than I suspect, or she's used to having no magic. Why don't you just devour her and get it over with?" The snake thing that had interrupted her earlier said in a bored tone, sliding up to them in a manner that, even for a snake, was unmistakably a swagger. "I might be here," Marilla said softly, acid dripping from each word, "if someone hadn't been responsible for losing the rest of the captives. This one has to last now." If Bahir was intimidated by the menace in her tone, he didn't show it. Deeply concerned with the direction of this conversation, Trixie racked her brain for anything to say. "You won't get away with this." The snake thing stared at her with various degrees of surprise and irritation. Trixie felt her face glowing red by the second. The first thing to pop out of her mouth, and it sounded like a line from a bad con book. Marilla smiled and leaned in close enough for Trixie to feel the heat from her face. "Get away. We already have. There's nothing you or any of those pathetic ponies up above can do about it." "All right." Apparently Spy Axis Thriller was the theme today. Perhaps she and Meredith could exchange favorite titles over tea later. Trixie shook her head and tried to get something a bit more dignified through the muddle that was her thoughts. "What are you? What are you?" That was the best she could come up with. What have these things done to her mind to make it so stupid? Salamanders, the high priestess said with a grin that starred far too many teeth for comfort before simply turning away. We're moving on. Backwards, thanks to all your stupidity. The swarm had moved at her gesture, making impressive speed over uneven ground. Tracy laid her head against her captive's shoulder and sighed. First step, recovering her scattered wits. Second, figuring out some way to escape this insane situation before she was eaten like a box of chocolates on Hearts and Hose Day. She sucked a tight breath and gritted her teeth. Scratch that. Step 1 is to deal with this sun-blighted edge! Then heal, then escape. Chapter 4. Crashing the Crystals. Raindrop sneezed and brushed ineffectually at the dust in her eyes. So, is there some reason you brought us in here? You didn't expect the cave's entrances to be out in the open, did you? Wrigglecomb responded, trying and failing to use his telekinesis once again to move a pile of crates out of his way. Lyra sighed and picked it up with her own magic, setting it behind the group with the rest of the chunk. Thank you. This building used to be a waypoint for mining ore, but fell into disuse when richer deposits in the east were discovered some 400. Regal's voice droned on as the others tuned him out. It seemed Regaltone's natural state was lecturing ponies, as he had been doing almost non-stop since he brought them to this abandoned storehouse, seemingly picked at random. The building was buried inside with scrap and other rubbish, and everything layered with enough dust to suggest that no pony had been there in their lifetimes. The few windows were so grime-encrusted that no starlight could get in, so Lyra was providing the light. It was slow going, having to clear a path through all that rubble. It didn't help that their guide had clearly never set foot here himself. It's actually more common than you'd think, building new structures over old. Regal continued, shoving his way through the tangle of cables and completely ignoring his audience's lack of interest. I would have known about the caves if I hadn't overheard an intern talking about them several months ago. I theorized that the crystals might have had similar properties to be found in those in the north. A fact that the princess would find immensely interesting, I'm sure. Perhaps enough for me to be allowed back. Aha! Regal overturned a stack of boards and uncovered a rickety door set into the wall. The door was secured with a lock that was more rust than metal, and snapped it off with just a touch of his hoof. He pushed the door open and revealed a low tunnel carved out of bedrock, slowly sloping downwards. Now we're getting somewhere, Shirley said, then gestured the others to follow her. Come on, girls! Regaltome eyed the portal, as if bowling over something, and held out his hoof to stop Lyra, as he was about to enter. Miss Heartstrings. Lyra looked him up and down. You don't have to come down with us if you don't really want to, you know. You can wait here until those things are gone. Yes, well... Regal cleared his throat and avoided looking at her eye. See, I just wanted to get this off my chest. No, what I meant to say is... Look, I just wanted to say I really am sorry for what happened with the Seaver Spellbook. I never imagined anything like that happening, and, well, I apologize. Lyra blinked and smiled, turning into the tunnel to follow her friends. It's all right. It's in the past. You just make sure Bonbon knows how to find us down here, okay? Yes, of course. You can count on me, Regaltone said, sounding both nervous and relieved. He watched the 5 of them from the doorway until they disappeared into the darkness. The tunnel twisted and turned, and roughly hewn walls seemingly following no other path than down. After about 5 minutes, the tunnel led out into a large channel, this one running straight as a line, which was wide enough for the 5 of them to stand side by side comfortably. Wooden beams held at the ceiling at regular intervals. An old iron track cut through the center of the tunnel, and seemed to be in good repair compared to the door above. Raindrops trotted forward and tapped the rail thoughtfully, peering down each way they could take. So, now that we're down here, has any pony figured out how we're actually going to find Trixie? Now that you mention it, Shirley scratched her mane in embarrassment. I was just focusing on getting down here. There are only 2 directions, so we could flip a bit, Lyra suggested, before remembering she wasn't carrying any money. Does any pony have a coin? Carrot walked to the edge of the circle of light, cast by Lyra's horn, and gestured down the tunnel. Well, the library is back in this direction, So why don't we head this way and see if Francis Moore to the right later on? The others blinked at her, and Carrot Top shrugged self-consciously under their attention. I've got a good sense of direction. Great, Shirley applauded. They'll follow your lead. Get as close as you can. Carrot Top nodded and set off along the track, her friends close on her tail. All except Ditsy, who sat for a moment staring up at the ceiling. She blinked as the light dimmed and straightened up, running after their group to catch up. Rabbit blinked lazily and shifted on the low stone she found, sinking in to just a little more to find an extra smidgen of comfort. The High Priestess and the others were late, but that suited her just fine. It was unlikely they could have run into any serious trouble. Not with nearly half of the nest working together. Once again, she congratulated herself on the quick thinking to volunteer to guard the escape route. All that heavy digging would wear on a snake's fragile disposition after all. Mom! A salamander hissed, sliding up to Rabbit and shaking her as she were asleep. There's someone coming. Rabbit glared at the hand until the soldier dropped it hurriedly. Is it High Priestess? No, but then it's probably nothing. These tunnels are abandoned. She pulled her golden cap down as if to cover her eyes and settled back down. Her bracelets jangled dully, and she wondered idly if she could get new ones. She had to check when she returned if there was another raid planned soon. Mom, I can smell them, the soldier insisted. Rabbit's head arched up and she glared at him. Oh, the last time. There can't be any. She paused and flicked her tongue between her teeth into the air experimentally. Her eyes widened as her ice-heated son tasted more than stale air in the old stone in the breeze. There are ponies coming. That's what I said. The soldier started, but Rabbit paid little attention to him as she swept past him and stared around the curve of the tunnel. There, the glow of a bright golden light was just starting to come into view further down the mine. And from the wrong side. What were ponies doing along the escape route? What were ponies doing down here at all? We were promised they wouldn't interfere, she hissed, glaring at the stalely approaching light. Promise to what? Rabbit spun around and stared at the three salamanders who were under her command. She had not bothered remembering their names, as she had been told them to begin with. But she assumed the one in the middle, who was looking sheepish, was the one who asked. She suddenly realized the soft glow coming out their scales would be just as visible to the intruder as their light was to her. There's no time for that. They'll be here any minute. We'll stop them in the cavern up ahead like we've prepared, even if they are coming from the wrong way. Gesturing furiously to get them moving, she mentally cursed her loose tongue. She also spent several choice phrases on the intruders. It was going to go even harder on them if they forced to spend what little free time she had left dealing with them instead of relaxing. Look at this, Shirley said, stepping up to a strange rock lying on the wall. What do you think happened to it? The stone was steeply pitted in the top, to the point it was practically a bowl, but unevenly. Swirls like frozen waves on the ocean surface ringed the impression randomly. Shirley traced a hoof along one of the paths and found it as smooth as polished glass, despite the outside looking like a roaded sidewalk. There's a light ahead, Carrot Top said, almost at the same time. The group immediately forgot about the strange boulder and focused upward. Up ahead, the tunnel looked like it was going to open up into a larger area. The first chains they had started down it. It was well outside the light of Lyra's horn, but a dim glow illuminated the portal from the other side. From this distance, none of them could make out what was on the other side. Carefully, Shirley reminded them, but they hardly needed the suggestion as they huddled up, bracing themselves. They closed the distance quickly and poked their heads over the threshold. As one, their jaws dropped. The tunnel had opened up into a large cavern, and every inch of the walls was covered in a deep indigo crystal. It caught the light, shining off of Lyra's magic, and returned it twofold, bright and smooth enough to see one reflections in scores of polished surfaces. The walls seemed to have a phantom light of their own, briefly lighting up and fading in waves. Bursts of crystal rose out of the ground, and forming corridors into the conflicting pathways that kept them from seeing very far beyond where they were. The tracks they had been following continued right into those glittering structures and vanished around an outcropping. It's beautiful, Dizzy breathed, and the sound of her voice broke the trance they had fallen into. Lyra trotted to the nearest wall, and laid her hoof against the small surface. If this was what Regal was after, I totally understand why he wanted to come down here. Why do you suppose nobody comes down here anymore? Carrot wondered, craning her neck to stare up at the high ceiling. Cheerily picked up a particularly impressive shard from the ground and held it up to the light. I can't imagine. It's almost a shame Regal Tome isn't here. He probably knew. Let's not forget why we're down here, Raindrops said dryly, peering down the path track to wound down. We're still going this way, Carrot. Carrot shook her head and pointed down another path. We need to head this way for a bit. The others fell in behind her as she led them into the maze of crystal. The path twisted and turned and split every couple of minutes. But Carrot confidently picked her course. The crystals glared and flared down around them as they passed. Charlie slowed down to pace with Ditzy, who was walking with her head down in front of the group. Are you okay, Ditzy? You're not worrying yourself too much about Trixie, are you? Ditzy flinched and tried to smile, but it came out forced. No, I'm not. I mean, I'm worried for her. I didn't mean that. It's just... Charlie rested a hoof on Ditzy's shoulder. Do you want to talk about it? It's fine, Ditzy sighed, gathering herself and raising her head to look her friend in the eye. I've got a handle on it. We've got to see Trixie. Are you sure that... Charlie started, but Raindrops' shout cut her short. Hey, keep up, you two! We found more tracks down here! The three of them were standing in a wide-open area, crisscrossed by a few rail tracks leading out through different paths. Several of them were filled with chunks of crystal shards, and all of them surprisingly good condition. The others were standing around one of the carts, looking out over a track on lifted rails, traveling over a sheer drop. Are you sure we have to go this way? Lyra was asking. It's heading right towards where the library is, Carrot answered, testing the cart wheels carefully. It's kind of strange that these aren't all decrepit. Do you think these creatures have anything to do with it? Maybe, Radar said, still looking at her two trailing friends. Suddenly, her eyes went wide as she charged toward them. Look out! Chili spun around and noticed two things very quickly. The first was that those phantom lights weren't all in the crystal walls, and in fact, were only nearby as if they had followed them. The second, and far more pressing thing, was that the nearest jut of crystal was tilting over them at an alarming angle. The two of them were paralyzed in shock. For 5 seconds, they needed to get out from under it. Fortunately, Raindrops wasn't similarly frozen. A jasmine blur tackled the two of them and carried them out of the path just before the enormous crystal smashed into the ground. The three of them quickly untangled themselves, and left them in time to see a reptilian face hiss at them from the gap left behind by the fallen crystal. They're in the walls! Raindrops screamed, right before rocks and crystals started to fall around them. They tried to dodge, but they could barely keep ahead of the carefully aimed debris. Carrot and Lyra tried to run to their aid, but a pair of giant crystals toppled into their path to cut them off. You have to do something! Carrot cried, trying to hop over the pillars to see what was happening. I can't! There's too many! Lyra desperately racked her mind and gritted her teeth. Get back! I'm not sure this is going to work. A golden spear grew out of the air behind her, resolving into Lyra's heart, which fell into her waiting hooves. Not bothering with the technique, Lyra ran her hoof violently over the strings, while simultaneously channeling a quick spell through the instrument. The sound of the cord grew louder and louder, until it was almost painful. The air seemed to thrum. Everywhere, the crystals lining the walls broke and shattered, including the fallen pillars that were blocking her friends. Several of the snake things were revealed, rolling on the ground and holding the sides of their heads. Lyra smiled in satisfaction as the sound died away, but was quickly replaced by a deep rumbling. The ground started to tremble and crack as the ceiling, which had been supported by the crystalline structures for far too long, started to bound down. It's collapsing! Lyra shouted, gesturing frantically for her friends to get clear. Raindrops and Cheerily started running, but Cheerily ground to a halt when they realized that Dizzy wasn't with them. Turning back, she saw the gray Pegasus was looking around wildly, without seeming to see anything, her breathing coming in loud gulps that could be heard over the rumbling. She cried out wordlessly and charged down a random tunnel, getting further away. Raindrops turned back at Ditsy scream, but Cheerily waved her back. I'll go after her! You just get the others out of here! No! Cheerily! Raindrops shouted, but the magenta pony vanished down the tunnel after Ditsy. Gritting her teeth in frustration, Raindrops spun around, flew as fast as she could. Large bits of the ceiling were starting to fall, but she bowled through the worst of it without flinching. She picked the two startled ponies up as she shot out of the avalanche and knocked them into the minecart. The minecart shot out under them along the track at a breakneck speed, barely keeping itself on track. What are you doing? Lyra shouted, but Raindrops held her down and tried to shield the two of them from the falling rocks as best as she could with her wings. Suddenly, the rail convulsed as a large rock smashed down upon it somewhere behind him, and the whole track wavered violently. The cart overturned and spilled the three of them out over a deep pit. Canterlot tried to grab the edge of the cart, but only succeeded in hitting the side of her head and scrambling her wits. She thought she felt something grab her, but everything collapsed into sound and darkness. What do you mean only the princess can open it? Bonbon demanded incredulously.
Just that. It's a magically sealed lock. Only Princess Luna knows how to unlock it.
Bonbon stared up at the admittedly impressive-looking safe doors and back to the guard standing protectively in front of it. And the princess isn't in Canterlot, you said?
No, ma'am.
So there's no way to get to the elements out, is there? The guard blinked, and seemingly to see the flaw in his logic.
Well, now that you've mentioned it...
Who thought of such a stupid thing? Lauren Faust, Bonbon. Lauren Faust. She thought it would be cool if we had the elements in a church-like structure so they could be honored as magical elements rather than pieces of jewelry. In hindsight, in my opinion, this was not a smart idea because this really prevents some emergency measures. But finally, onto the marble floor. The guard actually backed up a step before remembering which one of them wore the honor. I'm sorry, I didn't know, Moneypenny said softly, thinking furiously. She still seemed to be weak from her ordeal, kept putting a fork to her head. Lyra! Bonbon shouted, spinning around sharply. They're going to be waiting for us to bring the elements! We have to warn them!
That's enough,
Dapplecross said, gesturing to the guards, as they followed them into the room. They lowered their spears to block Bonbon from leaving.
Your plan has failed, so I'm taking control of the situation before any other civilians get in danger. We'll form a rescue party as soon as we can.
He turned his way for the two mares and started issuing orders, sending guards running off at a gallop. Not soon enough, Bonbon muttered through gritted teeth. They need help now! Moneypenny laid her foreleg over her shoulder and gave her a reassuring hug. I'm sure they'll be all right. They are bearers of the elements, after all. I bet they've already got Trixie and are coming back as we speak. Bonbon smiled at the effort to cheer her up, but a small spark of worry burned in her heart anyway. Somehow, she just knew it wasn't going to go that way at all.